Thursday the 24th of October 2024. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to invite everybody to join me in the 72 seconds silence to remember those of our friends and neighbours who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy in 2017. You, Emily. So apologies for absence from the committee. We've had apologies from Councillor Schmetterling. From that side of the table, we've had apologies from the lead member, Councillor Kamali. Both of them have absolutely cast iron reasons for absence, which I'm aware of. And I know the Executive Director's also sent apologies away this week. Are there any other apologies from the committee, bearing in mind we have a no-show over the other side of the table? Okay, so we don't know about Councillor Benson. Item 2, the declarations of interest. I'll look to my left.
Yes, I'm on board of Western Riverside Waste Authority, and therefore for that item I will step away from the table and not be part of the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. You can't scrutinise yourself. I think very appropriate. Any other declarations of interest from the other side of the table? Very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are we all content? I will sign the minutes. Is it James, version of them. And on the action tracker, I just want to observe the second item on the action tracker appears to be extremely late. It's supposed to be divided within 6 months of the 4th of December 2023, and we're now nearly 12 months. Do you have any explanation for that, Emily?
They've been chased multiple times.
Have we chased by the Executive Director?
No, not as of yet.
Oh, we need to do that. So we chase, in fact, can we copy the Chief Executive in as well, but chase by the Executive Director, please? That's far too late. And the other one about it to be provided within a year is getting a bit close as well. Okay, any other points on the action tracker or anything? Right, we can then move on to item 4, and we welcome Trevor from Western Riverside Waste Authority and Matt as the Lots Officer on the Council. And just wait for the Vice Chair to go and take a seat in the public gallery, as it were. And well, thank you for the paper. Matt, we want to start and then hand over to Trevor.
Yes, certainly. So just to give a bit of background, Kensington and Chelsea is a collection authority only. We do not dispose of our waste within borough. Along with 3 other boroughs, Hammersmith and Fulham and Lambeth and Wandsworth Council, we are constituents members of the Western Riverside Waste Authority. Trevor is the Deputy General Manager at Western Riverside Waste Authority. There's a lot of work going on at the moment with the authority. One of the big pieces of work is the environmental strategy that is being worked on in collaboration with the 4 boroughs, and there's other pieces of work that will then form a strand that moves on to look at procurement for the waste management services agreement that each of the boroughs has with Western, I'll say WRWA, with Corey, who are the company which actually oversee the disposal of the waste that we take down to the waste transfer stations. We also have a lot of work ongoing with the waste transfer stations, some of which are going to need some work in the foreseeable future. before the end of the Waste Management Services Agreement commences in 2032. So lots of stuff going on, but the waste strategy is integral to all of this. So I will hand over to Trevor, and he will give a bit of background on the waste strategy, what it's looking to achieve, how it will impact us as a borough, and we've recently just finished the consultation, public consultation, so he'll be able to give some feedback on the comments, etc., that came with that as well.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. What I'd like to do is just outline what the strategy is, why it's needed, what stage we're at with it, and what the next steps are. So firstly, I think you can see it as a statement of collective ambition for the Western Riverside Waste Authorities that Matt just outlines as 4 boroughs. For waste management for the period 2025 to 2040. It's actually a strategy that's required by law for waste disposal authorities. And it needs renewing every 5 years, and the current one is over 5 years. The reason that we haven't renewed it before now is because there's been quite a lot of flux in terms of government policy, and it was felt sensible to wait to see how that settled. So the reason it needs renewing and revising is, as I say, changes in government policy, obviously demographic changes as well, and forecasting ahead for population growth, for example. But also, as Matt said, there is a procurement exercise needed in the next few years leading up to 2032 when the current contract expires, and we will need a clear position in terms of strategy and objectives and so on for that procurement. So it sets out the collective ambition and priorities. It's important to say it's not an operational plan for the collection authorities. Collection authorities clearly make their own operational plans, and it's not for our authority to second guess those. But what we do, what we have done is we've done forecasting of what we believe future waste arisings will be, taking into account demographics, and also what we know about government policy and when policy change is going to take place. We've done benchmarking with other similar authorities. We've also modelled different waste collection arrangements to see what the results of these different waste collection arrangements would be, and to see what the potential, for example, recycling rates would be in different scenarios. So that work started in 2023 with workshops for members and officers, leading to drafting a vision for the strategy, which is in the papers that you have in front of you. So some of the key elements of the strategy are the draft vision, the recycling targets, and also the priority areas or the theme areas within it. And the draft recycling targets are 30% for household recycling by 2030 and 45% by 2040, and 35% for what's called local authority collected waste, and that includes commercial waste basically, so it's household plus commercial. 35% by 2030 and 50% by 2040. And as I say, there are priority themes within it, and the intention is to work up joint action plans with the boroughs to implement the action, the themes, the priority themes within the strategy. So the draft strategy was put out to public consultation for 6 weeks, which is just closed just last week. There was an online survey and 5 focus groups. So the focus groups were 1 in each borough, and then there was one sort of collect all one at the end, because on each individual focus group, there was quite often there was 1 or 2 people who didn't turn up, so we did another one to pick up those people who weren't able to make the previous ones. And they were sort of based. They were based using a specialist company that did a sort of representative, demographically representative group on each of the focus groups. 1, as I say, 1 in each. So that's now closed, and we're getting the results of that. it was very positive in terms of the support for the priorities within the strategy and the vision. There were a number of comments that the recycling target should be more ambitious and should be achieved more quickly than what we're putting in the draft strategy. So that's one of the things we're looking at, and currently we're discussing with the boroughs whether we should have what we call, and you may be familiar with the term stretch target. So you have a target, but you also have a stretch target. The stretch target is essentially an aspirational target where you're going to try and get a bit further than your target. And the stretch target we're proposing is 3% more than the figures I just gave you. We have actually done some modelling to see if that's achievable. It isn't just a figure we pulled out of the air, like some targets are sometimes. So what we did was we looked at, I don't know if you're familiar with the term RRP, so resource and recycling plans. Each borough has to produce one of these, and it sets out in some detail what it's going to do to try and improve recycling. And there's all sorts of things in there like reducing contamination, which I think KNC have been very good at and leading the pack on that. Introducing food waste, doing more food waste in flats, things like that. And they're set out in detail. So we went through all of those for all the 4 boroughs and measured what we thought, if they were all implemented, what the effect would be, and it was another 3%. So that's why we're suggesting a stretch target of 3%. So in terms of next steps, we're currently drafting a report for our board, which meets on December 4th, which will summarise the results of the consultation and propose changes to the draft strategy as a result. The only significant change we're likely to be suggesting is this stretch target of an additional 3%. There's a few other factual and clarification things that we're also putting in there, but they're not material really. We will be circulating a draft of that report to borough officers next week, probably the end of next week, so there's plenty of time to have a look at that before that December meeting. The intention is that we would like to sign off a final strategy at board in February, which allows each of the boroughs to take it to their decision-making body and hopefully endorse it in time for that February meeting. So that's obviously happy to try and answer questions.
Very good, thank you very much, Joe. We'll start with, on this direction with one, and we'll go around the room this way. So,
I have 2 small questions. One is on page 16, you're talking about at the very top 3.1. Says here prioritize waste prevention. Can you give me an example of what that is? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I think most people would agree that really the best thing we can do in terms of carbon emissions and the whole process is to reduce the amount of waste. So waste prevention is a range of different things, and it could be reuse activity, could be repairing activity, it could be it's essentially sort of using less stuff and producing less waste. So there's a range of things that can be done there. One of the things that we'd be interested in looking at is setting up a reuse and repair centre somewhere. At the moment, we couldn't do it within any of our existing premises, they're too constrained. But there are a number now across the country, and there's a really good one actually operated by Suez, in fact, in Manchester, which is like a big shed with lots of different bits in it where they're taking in all sorts of materials and reusing them, selling them back to people. So things like that. And I think you've got some library of things outlets here. That's another waste prevention thing.
so you're looking at changing the culture of, because we moved from a culture of fixing everything when I was young, everything got fixed. Nobody went and bought stuff from Argos because it doesn't, because the plug is not working. But now we are a very disposable culture, and we just throw the stuff and buy more cheaper. So how are you going to change the
some of the things I've been saying, but also education, an education programme. We're looking to strengthen we have an education team based at WRWA, and we're looking to strengthen that team and to do more work with them, really. But I think we do have to recognise that there is a limit to what
Work.
local authorities and
Yes.
people like ourselves can do on this. But, you know, we need to do what we can.
Thank you. My second question is on page 44, and you have the different categories and the average across the borough. And in garden waste, you have 5.7, and I'm thinking, in such a green borough, 5.7%. Because some of the garden waste somehow get mixed up with other waste and maybe goes under the other residual waste, or am I just thinking we have more than we actually do garden waste?
Yeah, I think, I mean, from our perspective, we're geographically quite a small borough, we're very densely populated, and actually not that many people have gardens. So we have about 1,800 households on our garden waste collection service, which gives you an idea of how many. We've got about 93,000 households in the borough, but only 1,800 use the garden waste service. So it is challenging. You know, when you've got other boroughs like Bromley, for example, which is very, very leafy and lots of garden use there. So it can be quite misleading if you compare our rates of garden waste disposal compared to you know, some of the outlying boroughs. It's not that we're not, you know, doing as much as we can. It's just we haven't got the built environment for it. So it's you know, unfortunate. And the other boroughs that are within the WRWA are very similar to us. They're all very densely populated.
Thank you.
Tim?
Thank you for that. So a few questions I had. One was around page 13 of your draft strategy, which outlines the new logistic requirements. And I was just wondering, how are you preparing for those, especially around the dry recycling new items? I see cartons for food, etc., but also recyclable plastic film. And just to clarify, recyclable plastic film, does that cover any soft plastics?
Yeah,
Different.
that's right. Yeah, it's things like the peel off tops and
And does it sort of
Yeah, if you have a salad or something like that, flimsy peel off top that.
So does it also cover the plastic bags from
Yeah,
supermarkets,
absolutely.
crisp bags, etc.? So,
yeah, okay.
so how much? And follow-up question on that is how much non-recyclable plastic is there left in the residual waste? Do we expect?
Yeah. I can't give an exact figure for that. I could come back with some more information on that, because we do very detailed composition surveys and stuff coming in. On soft plastics, we've been talking to Corey about what they can do with the materials recycling facility there at Smugglers, and they believe that they can take out soft plastics fairly quickly. So we will be able to talk to your officers fairly soon and say, look, you know, if you want to change the message you're giving out to residents, you can say you can put soft plastics in recycling, as long as that works for your collection arrangements, because we will be able to take them out in our facility. And we have got the other part of it is not just taking them out of the waste stream, it's what you do with them next. You know, we have got an outlet for them as well. So that's one of the things we can do in advance of the change in legislation. But some of the other things like aerosols, for example, are more problematic.
Yeah.
If aerosols have got anything in them, then they're classified as hazardous waste. So, you know, it's more difficult really to handle those. So we're working on that with Corey at the moment. So how we do it.
Question actually from my colleague, Councillor Schmidt, who unfortunately could not be here. How do you deal with mixed items? So, for instance, tin, which is recyclable, which still has at the moment some soft plastic on from the supermarket, for instance, that gets into the dry recycling bag. How do you deal with that?
Well, we just separate out the metals, and obviously they will have some coating on. But that's really a job for the next, you know, there's several different stages that products go through. All we really do in our one is take out those metal and then put them all together and get them off to another.
So it does get recycled.
Yeah,
it does get
yeah, and then they'll deal with that.
If I can tin of soup's got a paper wrapper around it,
Yes,
we wouldn't separate that. It will go into the tin recycling, and then when it goes to the next stage,
Yeah.
that gets dealt with.
Perfect. And one final question on page 27, we provide an overview of the different boroughs and we nicely circle around the different boroughs for the Western Riverside Basin. Page 14 in the front.
Yeah.
So I was referring to the pages of your.
It's 27 and travel paper and 48 for that.
You made a nice comparison there. What I found very interesting is that Lambeth is actually doing a lot better than the three other boroughs, taking into account that London is the worst in the UK when it comes to recycling. That actually makes, unfortunately, our number of boroughs quite at the bottom of London as well. What is Lambeth doing differently, or what is different about Lambeth that they can improve, that they have a higher rate than the three other
What is
boroughs?
different about them? Yeah, actually, when we looking at this graph, we would say this shows that Western Riverside authorities are doing really well, because although, as you say, the overall recycling rate is low, if you look at the blue columns, then we're actually doing pretty well compared to a number of others there. And the blue columns are the dry recycling.
Right.
Yeah.
The green is and it goes back to Matt's comments earlier. A fairly unique aspect of the four boroughs that we work with is the lack of gardens and the lack of garden waste.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones with the highest recycling rates generally, you look at Bromley, the column is half.
Almost half is green waste. The thing about Lambeth, they have got slightly more in terms of gardens that they have. But actually, the biggest thing with them is that they've had food waste collections for all their curbside properties for years. Whereas we're still rolling it out, as are Wandsworth and Hammersmith and Fulham. So that gap will actually narrow as we start to roll it out to all of our residents.
Because they collect food and garden waste.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the draft strategy, no comments from myself to the resident that I've engaged with. And Sarah, I think I had a couple of, I would say, comments, but submission. When residents have the option to walk in, well, work hard, I've used multiple times.
Yeah.
Any strategy around the timings, because they're not that flexible for someone who have a day job or manage their families, or just one day where you could prolong like a long, like Thursday, you have shops being open for longer just to manage that weekday. Weekends, obviously, I think you close at 3 or 3:30 because one day I just walked in and missed for 5 minutes, I had to get back again and then come back the next week. Because I was hoping to have that in the current services and the Tier 1, but I couldn't find that in the strategy.
Yeah.
Timing is a big factor for walk-ins. I understand the rest all are clear, fantastic. By RBKs, obviously I can't speak to other boroughs, but it's very crucial for someone who is managing building waste, for example, minor alterations, or any recycling, for example, bigger stuff that they can't use that. Because that also helps in illegal dumping, for example, on roads, health and safety issue as well, because if you stay longer, it's beneficial for the health.
But are you talking about people walking?
Walking.
I mean,
as in not
it's quite a small. I mean, one of the issues that the HWC
not
is
just
that
walking, but driving as well.
we have to
waste
book.
collection.
You do have to book. So
Yes, that's
when you book, you see what the times are. So really, if you're booking, you shouldn't really be arriving at a when it's
But
closed.
no, I agree, I completely. I'm talking about the straight shop timing because you close at 12:30 p.m.
No, I
on
understand.
a weekday.
Yeah, we do regular satisfaction surveys, and we've just completed one. I'm not aware of that being an issue in that survey, but I will take that back as
Please, yeah.
because obviously you can review opening and closing times of lots of HWRCs. In fact, a lot of them close on certain days and have it longer on other days, things like that. But
Because I did fill up the satisfaction survey and brilliant because I've used it, and then the next day I've got the satisfaction survey, which was brilliant because this I could do a survey, but it's just the timing because if you look at the traffic, it takes me, it's only a mile down or 2
Sure.
miles, but it took me like 45 minutes.
I mean, one of the other things that would be beginning to talk with Boris about it is whether there's a way of producing a facility like the HWRC, which isn't just sort of centralised, in one place, whether there's some kind of mobile way you could do that. Because if you look at the usage of it, then it's people that live near it that use it the most for obvious reasons, and people that live quite a long way away very rarely go down there. So it's not accessible for everyone at all. Really.
I suppose it's a point about timing, because I was clearing a house, a family house in Sussex a couple of years ago, and I was going to the local recycling centre, and they got to know me quite well over the months, but I was going in there over the weekends, and actually not evenings, but weekends, and that was very useful. I think they mostly had a daytime and midweek closing day to make up for that, so and that was quite a useful service. Obviously, I have no idea what I haven't used a similar service here.
Yeah.
But it is useful to be flexible around what people want. Let me move on to Toby and your question. Sorry.
In terms of food waste, I know we have many recycling hubs. There are one in Holland Park, especially in number one on Holland Park, and which I use a lot. I know it might be years away from where we are right now. Any sort of mini recycling hubs that would help food waste, because then that's really useful.
Yeah, so with food waste, we are going to be touching on that in the second paper. So we are looking at a number of different alternatives when it comes to how residents can receive food waste collections. So for the majority, it will be caddies, so your usual caddies that people have. So you have a small in your kitchen, and you take the bag out and you put it in your slightly larger caddy. You then present in your front garden or within your premises, and the crews will come and obviously collect. But that isn't going to be the solution for everyone. So we understand that there are people who live in multi-occupancy properties where they don't have any external space, for example. So we are looking at some on-street solutions. We're trialling some at the moment. Is it bring banks you're mentioning? So where we have the recycling, yeah. So we've got that being trialled. A number of the bring banks that we have around the borough, they're being really successful. So they use a 240 litre wheel bin with a housing over it. And the contamination rates are really low, so that's actually quite surprising. I was expecting it to be quite an unsuccessful thing, but actually people are doing the right thing, so that's really positive. But we are looking at some other trials. We're looking at some slightly smaller bins with a very slim design that maybe could go in areas where you've got flats above shops, for example, where there isn't a space to have larger sort of bin banks. And we are looking at compostable sacks as well that could be placed outside. They will be tougher than normal sacks, but equally, they potentially could still fall foul of local wildlife, etc. So, we will look at a variety of options and we'll see what we can do around the borough. But we have to be able to offer the service to everyone, regardless of what type of property they're living in. So we need to have solutions. We've got to April 2026, and so we're trialling some things, and we're going to continue to trial new things into 2025, and then have a final solution by April 2026.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And just preliminary apologies to came up in pre-meeting, which I couldn't come to yesterday. I know this sort of by its nature, maybe falls outside and maybe I've missed something important, but the thing that I wonder about with recyclables is where they go and if we can monitor how effectively they are, in fact, if they are in fact recycled. And that's a sort of common issue people have with recycling, makes me very cynical about doing it. Is there a lot of people understand that there's a high chance it's going to go to another landfill. So I suppose my question is how, well, A, have I missed something? Yes, it's very possible, but specifically how feasible is once it leaves your, custody, then it becomes a sort of national and all the rest of it. Well, we as a local council would be kind of wondering what is available, if anything, for you or anyone at this sort of level to actually monitor the effectiveness of the recycling. So,
Well, yes, when it leaves us, it's taken by a haulage company to another supplier. All of that has every movement it makes is tracked, and there has to be waste transfer notes detailing it all. And our contractor wouldn't enter into a subcontract with anyone who wasn't complying with the law in that respect. So it doesn't just sort of disappear and we kind of forget about it. So we do know where all the recycling goes, and none of it goes to landfill. Even there's a significant amount that's still in general waste and not put into recycling, and that doesn't go to landfill either. That goes to our energy from waste department. So which is another issue, but basically it's not going into landfill.
I mean, I'd say landfill just as the worst case.
Yeah.
For example.
Exactly. We don't have any going into landfill.
Most of our recycling goes to different European countries, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Processes, a lot goes to Germany,
there's some in the UK, but
Netherlands.
yeah, but we do know where all the outlets are.
Great, and is that sort of accessible information for someone like me? Okay, good. Thank you.
But rest assured, there's an audit trail for everything.
Yeah, excellent. That's really what I was.
Thanks, Toby. So a few questions from me. I'll start with the targets mentioned, Trevor.
Yeah.
How confident are you that those are achievable?
Yeah, I am confident. I think in your recycling plan, your own recycling plan, you're looking at similar targets for 2025, and this is for 2030. So that gives you a bit more time to increase, for example, food waste recycling, which is one of the big uplifts that we're going to get. So I think we can, looking at that, I think we're pretty confident that you'll be able to meet these targets.
Yeah, okay. We can go into that in more detail in the next paper. Second thing I wanted to ask you about, when I started thinking about it, I was looking at your challenges that you set out on page 41. It starts on page 41. And I was thinking, how are we doing against those? And of course, that is partly answered in terms of the proportion of dry mix recycling organic material collected on page 48, which is the table we've been looking at a lot. But what I'm wondering about is what is the proportion of contamination in our recycling, and how has that been changing over time?
Yeah, well, it's been improving. So you might to give you a figure.
Yeah, so we have a target to not have any more than I think it's around about 12% contamination within our mixed recycling. We've been coming in consistently around the 10% mark. So we've been beating our target, and we've had quite a number of months where we've been getting below 10%. We are usually, unfortunately last month we won, but we're usually the best performing of the 4 boroughs that make up the constituency members of WRWA. We've done a lot of outreach work. We've got a team that goes out and works really hard to speak with the general public and make sure that they understand the importance of not contaminating, so washing your tubs and tins and just rinsing them out, etc. Making sure no food goes into recycling. We also work very closely with the crews, so they understand the importance of ensuring that the loads that they take for recycling, if they notice any contamination, so they check the loads to not obviously then take them in the recycling load and leave it for general waste to take. So they're very careful about what they take. So this is one of the reasons why we've been probably the best performing for the last couple of years out of the 4 members.
So at the risk of going into a personal question now, how clean do the food tubs have to be to not be contaminated? Do they have to be like dishwasher clean or no?
I mean it's just a general rinse. I mean, to be honest, even if some you get these microwave sort of tubs where people will cook a curry in the microwave, for example, and once you scraped it out there's still bits of curry. Even if you put that in, it wouldn't render the load contaminated. But it does make sense to try and limit contamination. So we do advise people to rinse out tubs, etc. It's more about food that goes into the food waste. That goes into the mixed recycling. It's when people would put like chicken bones and that type of thing in there, which can really cause contamination problems. So that's the biggest issue.
Right, so this is my personal education. I would risk of taking the committee down this route. The curry I had tonight, the container went into the general risk waste. I'm sorry to say, not the recycling. So perhaps I could have done better. There's a lesson for all of us, and I will think about that for the future. But when I was looking at page 50 in the opportunities we've got there, we've been talking about food waste quite a bit at the bottom. Clearly, the capture rate's very low at the moment, and we have a plan. It struck me that textiles is a great opportunity there because they are dry, and they're also, well, they can be quite heavy as well, so they could make an impact in terms of volume. How difficult would it be to presumably convert Smuggler's Way, or the existence of Smuggler's Way, to have a textile line as well as everything else?
Yeah, well, we do. I mean, obviously in the HWRC at Smugglers, we take textiles there, and when people bring things in.
I mean, put them in the
But
bag so you can separate.
I think it would be difficult to separate them out. I mean, a lot of textiles that are collected at the moment are through charities and through textile banks. But even that is in some state of flux at the moment because I think the global market for textiles is not as healthy as it used to be. So, but you're right. That's an area which we need to look at to see if we can get the potential gains there are significant.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a massive gain. Also, probably less complicated than the food in some ways, except that you'd have to change your machinery to when the bags are ripped open to and that I recognise might be complicated. And I have had the benefit of visiting Smuggler's Way because we had really useful councillors, actually probably 2 councillors' days out in the last council term. So I was wondering if we could perhaps organise something for this council term, because I recognise some of my colleagues haven't been to Smuggler's Way because it was done before the elections in 2022, and maybe we could do a couple of days offering it to the entire council. I know I'm getting some nods from people who haven't been re-elected in 2022 and those who missed it in the 2018 term. That would be possible during a couple of days. Thank you very much. We might put that as a recommendation to the committee as well, and maybe we have some out and a couple of options to do it so we can offer it to everybody. It would be everybody on the council, not just our committee, because I think it's genuinely really interesting visit for those who haven't had the chance yet. Let me ask if any members in the room on the back row have any questions, Mary or Eva? Any questions for the side? No? Okay. Good. My last question was actually, I think this will be from Matt, and I think I know the answer, but on page 64, my exact quote, it's talking about increasing the proportion of vehicles that are ULEZ compliant. I think I know the answer to that, but how are we doing in RBKC?
Oh, all of ours are ULEZ compliant. Yeah, they were ULEZ compliant before it became a thing.
Yes, I thought they were, yes. All right, well, that's good to know. Good to get that reassurance that we are ahead of the game on that one. Thank you very much indeed for that. Good. Well, Trevor, thank you for coming to this tonight and for your paper and that introducing it. And we'll let you away for the evening.
Thank you.
Again, you have the Vice Chair take his seat back on the table as we move on to the next paper. Street enforcement teams, PET and food waste, which you've already been talking about. Yes.
And a little bit of general recycling update as well.
Yes.
So, yes, with regards to street enforcement, so the street enforcement team was launched on the 1st of November. We brought together the previous contracts enforcement team and the street warden team. So all of the different areas that were covered by those 2 teams are now covered by a single team. They're geographically based across the borough, and I think there's currently about 16 or 17 officers, and they have recruitment out to bring in a few more to bring them up to, I think it's close to 20 officers. So I think it says 23 there actually, but I think that includes the senior officers as well. In terms of the performance, there's a number of different tables that have been inserted here, which give you an idea of the flavour of the types of work that they're involved with. So dumped bags, as you probably wouldn't be surprised, is one of the biggest issues. So trying to identify the perpetrators and, where possible, issuing fixed primacy notices for that. Abandoned bicycles, which I know is a particular issue that you've been interested in recently, and the chains and the locks, etc.
Only because of the constituent mention, or two constituents mentioned in the space of a week. First time I've had 6 years, but it's a recent interest.
Doppler spikes, I know this is a particular issue, and it's something that we try and deal with, but it needs to be addressed with the suppliers. And I know that we have colleagues in other departments that are working with those suppliers to ensure that they are taking responsibility for users that obviously don't put them where they should be. And we've made a big effort as a council, haven't we, to provide that space for them. PSPO vehicles, obviously a big piece of work that started back in 2015, I think it was now. So that continues at pace. We have the acoustic cameras there, which can obviously pick up the offences, and then it's for the team to go through all of those triggers and look at those. And then abandoned vehicles, etc. So that gives you, there's lots more that they deal with, but they were the sort of main areas of work. I won't obviously go through every single bit that's in the report, but are there any points that you want to raise with regards to?
There will be, yes.
Yeah.
We can go around the room and give you a good branding.
Okay.
Whatever ideas are lighted on, I'll go this way around. So Sam first.
Oh, thank you. Residents are wanting to know what, so I'm interested as well, what can we do with buildings where, particularly short-term lets, or bad landlords who are not taking control or have provided any rubbish areas for places, and therefore the tenants come in and they're just told to dump it on the streets as their instruction.
Yeah.
The tenants themselves we can't necessarily locate because they might not have the plans and matters that we can do. Is there work going on about how landlords or property management can be made responsible for bad stuff that's happening and spilling out onto the streets?
So, it's a complex issue. When it comes to the planning process for new properties, obviously we work closely with planning colleagues to ensure. In fact, I had a meeting today about the Earls Court development, so ensuring that there's going to be the appropriate waste storage facilities. Where you've got existing properties and the freeholder, landlord, whoever it may be, decides to take the waste storage area out of use for waste storage, it's very difficult for us. My understanding is, from a planning perspective, there isn't really anything we can do about that. So it then comes down to managing how that waste is presented. We will obviously work with landlords, and in a lot of cases we can get that back into use and ensure that it is used properly. A lot of the problems actually are where there's issues with the waste storage area from a vermin perspective, or it could be there's an access issue where they've got scaffolding up and the crews can't get access without there being a danger to their health and safety. In that case, a stop notice is served on the property, which states that until whatever issue it may be is rectified, we will no longer be collecting from the waste storage area, and so the waste then has to be presented on the street. But we work hard to ensure that those issues don't last too long, so that we can obviously get the waste off the street. Where a landlord, though, like you used as an example, has taken it out of use completely, I think it's a really difficult one, and we don't generally have the powers to make them have to use that.
And just on the Airbnb specifically, so Airbnb, all of those waste facilities can be perfect. The Airbnb people will still put it out, or their cleaners will put it out.
Yeah.
Is there anything that can be done about so we've got sort of Airbnb registers or property registers? Is there anything you can go after the owner of the property for having their tenants
Yeah.
or short-term tenants not manage space properly.
And so there's a piece of work going on at the moment with regards to this in Bute Street, funnily enough. And there's two different areas here. So you've got serviced apartments, which are different than the Airbnb situation. So if I just tick off the serviced apartment bit, so you understand where we are with that. Serviced apartments do get classified as a commercial operation. So if we understand that there's a block where there might be, say, 10 flats that are being used as serviced apartments, they will be approached and told they need to have a commercial waste contract. If they don't get one, then obviously they will fall foul of the legislation and receive fixed penalty notices and or prosecution accordingly. With regards to Airbnbs, it's slightly more complicated because you could have a block with maybe 5 or 6 Airbnbs, but each one is owned individually by a different landlord. But there are ways that we can tackle that. I don't have, forgive me, but this service doesn't actually sit under me. I'm presenting for my colleagues. I do believe that they have found a way that they can now classify an Airbnb property as being commercially run, and so they will have to get a commercial waste contract on that basis. But this was very recent that I got this information. I don't have the ins and outs of it, but what I will do is I'll make sure that we update the committee with that information.
And one final refinement, apologies, but maybe you've got these in your areas as well. Where a registered social provider is managing the block,
Yeah.
and there are continual dumping problems from that, is it at all possible to go after that provider for not managing their block properly, because they're neither Airbnb nor serviced?
No. So it's unlikely. It's the person that generates the waste rather than the social landlord in that particular case. However, there are ways that we can deal with issues again with waste storage areas where they're not using them appropriately, or they need to be rectified in one way or another. We normally have a good working relationship with the social landlords that operate in the borough, so we generally can sort those problems out. But no, to answer the question, the person that actually produces the waste and places it out would be the person that needs to be followed up through enforcement action.
So, sorry.
Thank you. Just number one, Sam, thank you for making that point. Overall, we have a lot of social providers, and basically AWOL, we try and contact them for ongoing waste issue.
Yep.
So personally, I'm putting in that. So beyond that, questions about distribution of water and how again I might be using caveating with that, but it's so in terms of the number of how many users are assigned to not just North, South, East, West, but wards specifically, and how funding influences that as well. Because I get a bit, just sort of tell you where I'm coming from. Part of my ward is the market, huge amounts of just social enforcement, civic enforcement is required as well, due to the market. But we also find it difficult to get extra ones because that's funded entirely out of rental. So yeah, can you just tell me about that, like how that's the wards are actually assigned wards and what numbers and what goes into that?
Yeah. So the borough is split into 3, so you've got North, Central and South. So you have 3 teams, but each ward does have an officer assigned to it. So you will have an officer that is dedicated to that particular ward. However, they're never all working at the same time, of course, so they're on shift patterns. So what will happen is you'll have a team that covers, say, the North, and they will have to cover a number of different wards at any one particular point of time, but they will be dedicated to a particular ward and will understand the intricacies of that ward and get to know the problems that are there. With regards to the market, and I appreciate the market is very unique and has issues that maybe other parts of the borough don't experience. There is the market team that operate there, and they have dedicated enforcement officers that during the market hours are obviously operating there as well. So you've got an additional resource in the market, which you don't get in other parts of the borough as well.
Okay, yes, I'm sure, thank you.
Yeah.
And just one other question about graffiti. I'm just looking for it. My assumption is that graffiti is just removed because it's graffiti, right? There's a mention of removing offensive graffiti, and the timescale of removal. My question is, if offence is a mitigating issue,
Yeah.
it's likely to speed up the process of getting removed.
Yeah.
How's that decided? What's the criteria? I'm thinking of more or less offensive. I'm thinking of also not so much in Portobello and also Goulburn. There was really just a war of attrition between basically two groups. It was a very anti-LGBT group.
Yeah.
It was very, and there was a lot of really nasty stuff. And that's my question. Is there is there a sheet somewhere?
Well, I think that, no, we don't have a sheet, but if you're attacking the characteristics of a particular individual, whatever those characteristics may be, whether it is their sexuality, whether it's their race, whether it's their religion, that is what constitutes the majority of what we would consider offensive graffiti, along with swear words. So generally we will know what is offensive, but there can be some stuff that's subjective, and I appreciate that what one person might find offensive, another won't. But generally, if someone reports, and we get very few reports where someone says there's some offensive graffiti, where we get it, we will just remove it as offensive graffiti because we don't get that much. We're not going to quibble over the fact that something might not, in our opinion, be particularly offensive. We'll just get it done.
And you are really responding to reports primarily, right? Like it's not like you're going around looking and deciding.
No, well, we remove all graffiti.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. Well,
Whether it's offensive or not, we will come across offensive graffiti probably before it even gets reported to us. So we will proactively. We get very few reports nowadays about graffiti because we're so proactive in getting rid of it that it's really not there. Where you'll find the majority of graffiti nowadays in large numbers is on TfL assets. So their bridges and some of their buildings, walls, those types of things. We have been working with them to try and get that resolved, and they have, to be fair to them, they have done some removal. But the problem with TfL's idea of removal is that they'll do it once and then they'll disappear and you won't hear from them again. So we need to work on a process, whether that be through a carrot or a stick. I'm happy actually to work with them on the basis that if they pay, we will do it for them, but we're not going to do it for them free of charge. They're a big organisation. They've got deep pockets and they need to be obviously paying for that.
Excellent. Yeah, of course there was actually on the Westway as you approached it from the north down Portobello Road. Also, you just saying Andrew Tate, and it's like that's a very difficult to say if there's a criteria. But I'm going to. That's really one.
So we did receive a complaint about that, and that was removed by TfL, but it took a bit of pushing to get that done.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Very much. Sorry. All right, thank you, Chair. I know we've been in conversation on many things about, especially going back to the registered provider, not necessarily social housing, but housing that managed by registered providers.
Yeah.
We might have a good working relation, but I'm afraid, based on the experience, we could not do anything. We could not satisfy the neighbours. We could not enforce them or resolve issues. They don't care. Nor they have that feeling that they're concerned the issues. They do it, they can do it, or they don't go that extra mile to resolve the issue. It's been 4 years we couldn't resolve that issue on Holland Road and on Russell Road where there's lots of dumping to help us to clear that, which is not council responsible, that's public money. We're spending on behalf of residents to resolve an issue which is technically in.
Was that the one next to the little playground? Yeah. That big story was an absolute joke.
We couldn't. Fine, I understand in terms of a person dumping something. Might be he's a resident of a registered provider. Yes, we could enforce that. But things like Russell Road, we shouldn't be doing that.
There are ways we can enforce with that though. So have you heard of community protection notices?
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be the route. because a community protection notice can effectively be tailored to whatever you want it to be, within reason, of course, because it has to be reasonable, and it does have to satisfy a certain number of criteria. For example, it has to you have to be able to prove that the problem is ongoing, that it's a consistent issue, and that it's been causing a detriment to the local amenity. And I think with that particular case, it could. And they were threatened with that, and then they did pull their finger out and resolve the issue. Are you saying that it's still a problem again now?
Yes, they did resolve the issue. I remember we were looking at this route to sort of, be responsible in that way, or further notice for the registrar. Temporarily, there was a resolution by the registrar, but then it's the same thing. And the same thing by the Nottingham Gate. We said, why don't you send that just to your tenant, just to maintain that responsibility of the dumping rate and the reasonable times that everyone, which is unacceptable. But nothing really happened. So I guess the other thing is every time you email Nottingham, they're not responsive. Oh, sorry, I left the job. There's someone who's looking at it.
Yeah.
So I think we need to have a list of database essentially, to have that name firstly. Secondly, maybe we just send letters to the residents on behalf of them, or straight to them and say, we're taking action because nothing has been done.
We can certainly send letters to residents explaining to them best practice and how they should be using the bin store area. But I think in that particular example, it was actually the housing provider that wasn't maintaining the bin store area properly, and it was just filling up and filling up and filling up. And then it got to the point where Suez refused to collect because they're not going to go into something that is just like the Wild West. So it has to be their responsibility. We can escalate things to a level where we don't need to find like a localised officer that works for the housing trust who changes, like you say, on a regular basis. We can go up to higher levels than that. So I'm happy to speak with the street enforcement team and ask them to monitor that again. I've not heard from Suez at all to say they've had any problems there recently, and that's normally the first indicator we get. Is Suez will come to us and they'll say, look, we've got big problems here, you need to step in and try and sort that out. So I'll mention it again with the street enforcement team, just ask them to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, comment about the street enforcement, Ursula, she's fantastic. She responds very on the ground and instantaneously resolve the issues, but sadly the register provider is very upset. There's nothing was done for about, since even I was elected in 2018. Constant issues. So it's something that I love to.
Yeah, so maybe they do need to have a bit more of a push through the enforcement techniques that the team's got. So yeah,
and that would be helpful because if one enforcement was issued and that spreads out to other, it's a statement to other registered providers.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question on how do you make residents aware of this so that they know who to call when they see a problem?
So with street enforcement, I think that on the website there's so you have a report it function on the website that is it breaks down into quite a number of different issues. So it could be a waste related issue, or it could be something to do with the highways. The flagstones, for example, need replacing because they're damaged or something along those lines. So you can search the different criteria. I appreciate not everyone's got that ability necessarily to use the internet. In terms of advertising the team, I don't suppose it really is. It's one of those situations where if someone has an issue, they will contact the council either through emailing the council or phoning the council, and then they will be guided to the right team. And it's done that way. But no, it's not really sort of advertised other than sort of on the website, etc.
So no communications to residents. You're not working, for instance, with the residents' associations to ensure that they're aware of the team, etc.
There's work has been done in the past with regards to waste services to obviously update residents on the work that's done there. We have an outreach team, especially with recycling, trying to push the initiatives there, working to ensure that people are doing the right thing with their recycling. With the street enforcement team, no, it probably hasn't been in quite the same way. It tends to be more of a service that people will come to rather than us sort of going out and saying this is the street enforcement team.
Yeah, I'm just thinking
But,
if
I
more
mean,
people were aware of it, more people would actually come to it as well.
Potentially,
if they saw
yeah,
something on the street instead of, because before I was elected, if I saw something, I wouldn't know what to do, so I wouldn't take any action.
Yeah.
If I know what to do, I would probably be more inclined to take action.
I mean, it's something we could.
That's really the question. It's not so much about the street enforcement team, which is the method of clearing it. It's how do people report problems.
Yeah.
And there's that fantastic website, Report It, with about 12 different options.
Yeah.
But I just wonder how widely has that been advertised to the borough's residents.
I mean, we have local community publications, don't we, and ways of being able to contact different residents associations. So yeah, I mean, it's something we can certainly look into and distribute that information.
I would guess the more, I guess that's my advice to you really, and I think probably the committee's view is the more people know about it, the better, because
it's definitely the best way to do it. The report it function is better than phone and street line, which can be, can take a bit of time sometimes if it's exceptionally busy. And emails, again, it's not quite as.
I was going to just mention I printed it on the back of my council cards, so if anyone complains about it, I just hand my card and turn it over.
I've got it on my emails. I've got the link at the bottom of my email. But did you finish your questions, Jen?
One more question, which was obviously my ward has a PSPO, and some of the items added to the PSPO is obviously covered by the set team anyway. How do you separate data-wise what is part of the PSPO reported and what is regular set reported? Because looking at the data here, there is a specific PSPO section, but I don't know what that covers.
So in terms of you're correct. So the PSPO, for example, covers littering, but littering is a separate offence. If they serve a fixed penalty notice, it will be under one of those two regimes, and if it's done via the PSPO, it's registered under that particular criteria. If it's done via a fixed penalty notice for littering, again, it's coded. So we can separate out the different elements of it. Where the difference might be, where it might be slightly more difficult to break down, is because the PSPO covers a number of different criteria. The fixed penalty notice served under that PSPO will just show that it's been served under the PSPO. It won't necessarily be able to break down what that reason was without actually going into more depth to look at the individual reasons for why that PSPO was served. Whereas the littering one is for littering, and that's all it's for. From an officer perspective, it'd be better to do it under the littering anyway, because it's £50 more.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Thank you, John. Food waste collection,
Yes.
it's going to be a compulsory thing.
It's compulsory for us to offer it, but it won't be compulsory for residents to do it.
Okay, because I was thinking, how is it going to be collected? Is it a different vehicle?
Yes.
Or is it in a sort of a different vehicle? Okay, that answers that. Then coming to apartments, a lot of apartments have chutes, so they just put the rubbish down the chute, it goes downstairs and somebody picks it up.
Yeah.
Or they have arrangement with the porters and porters come and pick it up. How are we gonna do the food collection in this setup?
Yeah, so estates are obviously a different environment in terms of, this is why I was explaining earlier that we're looking at a number of different ways of being able to provide the food waste service to different built environments around the borough. We have a number of estates that already take part in food waste recycling, and the results are really, really positive. I think that you can't use chutes for obvious reasons. You've got a food waste bag, it's just going to split and it's just going to be everywhere. So it does require residents having to take the bag down to some central location where we've got a bin store area, for example, and place it in the bins. But people are leaving their properties on a regular basis, and when you leave your your flat, you can take it with you and put it down there, and it is working. People are doing it. I think that with food waste, it's a very, very popular service. People want to be doing the right thing, and they like being able to contribute to improving the recycling rates and taking waste out of the general waste. So I think that as we roll it out, of course there's going to be challenges, and there'll be some developments that maybe it's more difficult than others, but we will look at the best solution possible that we can with each individual circumstance. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, picking up on that as one of my questions or perhaps feedback points is the townhouses that are broken up into flats where the bins go down it.
High gardens, for example, or something like that.
A perfect example. In Westminster, they do seem to have food collections for that kind of property, and it was got. So I was talking to Matt on the phone about this. The street that I found where they had a lot of food caddies stuck out in the street was Gloucester Terrace, and it was a disgusting mess, I have to say. So that's probably an example not to follow where you've got caddies.
We will only give caddies to addresses where they can keep them within the boundary of their own property.
And that seems to be working very well.
Yeah, so we actually don't collect any caddies from the street. They have to be positioned. It's a bit like with the garden waste. You are informed that you have to place them in a visible location so that we can then collect them. So the caddies have to be within the curtilage of your own property. Obviously with estates it's different. But yes, so unless they're visible, we won't be collecting them. So people learn that they're going to be very quickly that they need to put them in a place that's visible. So with somewhere like Clanricarde, for example, we will have to look at alternatives because we can't use caddies. There's way too many properties and there's no curtilage that they can be placed. So it would either be that we look at the sack option, or we look at some on-street bins, and they will be a nice design. They'll be kept neat and tidy, and I know that there are certain attitudes towards having more receptacles on the street, and we want to limit that as much as we possibly can. But we also have to be mindful of the fact that this is a statutory obligation that we have to follow. We have to provide this if we're asked. So it's not that we have a choice. If everyone in Clanricarde Gardens wants to join the food waste collection service, we have to provide it to them. So, but to put your mind at rest, it won't be like that. We have about a 28 to 30% take-up rate. We offer the service to just over 17,000 properties, and about 30% of those take it up. So you can translate that to 93,000 properties. We're probably going to get a little under a third of the borough that will probably take up.
Well, I can tell you somebody in Collingham Gardens who's been pressing for this for 2 years in a flat from a flat, so they will be pleased. Just moving on to some other questions. On page 85, there's a couple of tables, and I didn't understand what the metrics were for those tables. I wonder if you can first do that. Yes, table 7 and table 8.
Yeah, so table 7 is your gross commingled tonnage. So this is looking at your recycling that is commingled. So you've got all your paper and your glass and your plastic and everything put together.
So it's tonnage is the metric in
that's
there.
right, yeah.
So is table 8, is that tonnage as well? Or
So table 8 is tonnage as well, that's right. So if we're looking at garden waste collections, we are slightly down on where we were this time last year.
I could see what the trend, I just didn't know what the figures meant.
Yeah. And then food waste is table 1, yeah.
So just going into the my next question, which is on the street enforcement team and staffing. You said there were 16 of them, and then the paper says 23, which includes the supervisors.
I think it's 20. There are 23 positions, but they're not all filled at the moment.
Right. So how many are filled? What's the turnover? My ward's on its second named officer at the moment.
Yeah.
How do they handle sickness? How do they deploy those not specifically allocated to the ward if there are? So how does it work at that level of detail?
So if you do have sickness, which obviously you do, they will allocate officers accordingly. Like I say, you've got different shift patterns. So you have like an early, a late, and then what we term as a sort of evening shift. So there will be crossover periods. But of course, because you've got those shift patterns, you're never going to have everyone in at the same time. Where you have sickness, they will allocate staff based on how busy certain areas are. So certain wards are busier than others. So Earls Court tends to be one of the busiest wards, for example. So if you have a member of staff that is no longer available that covers that area, it can cause particular problems, where somewhere like Chelsea Riverside is a lot quieter, and if there's a member of staff off there, it's not going to have such a detrimental impact to service delivery. So they work it based on the on how busy it is in different areas, and try and ensure that the coverage is given based on how busy those different locations are. There will be gaps, of course, from time to time, but they tend to get it right most of the time.
Okay, we'll move on from that point. I'll just put on record phenomenal work that we've done on graffiti and poverty, some removal as the expansion of the service. I mean, it really has made a noticeable difference, and actually the clear-all service as well. There is a noticeable difference in the streets in the last few months because of those things. And others, so well done, thank you. I'm going to ask questions from the floor. Questions? Yes, Eva, please.
I just wanted to ask you about the graffiti removal services.
Yes.
On your page 76, it says we had one team provided by the contractor. We had free removal from domestic property. So who paid for that? Another question: every ward has own allowance to remove graffiti. How much it is per ward? And if it's not spent in a year, what happens to it? Enforcement notice. How many have you served on TFM in regards to the bridge, Ladbroke Bridge? It has been not tidy up for years. How many enforcement notices have you served on the council in regards to Mansard House where graffiti is not removed? And this also applies to Canal and River Trust, since you have an enforcement power to do it. So, just moving on as the budget, how much was the Blitz program and who paid for that? Is it from what pocket?
So the original Blitz program was paid corporately. I think it was from an underspend during COVID due to staff not using travel allowances. So it was from that. So the Blitz ran for a year. That wasn't just graffiti removal. It covered jet washing as well, and it also covered what was the warden service at the time before they obviously got amalgamated into the street enforcement team. Since then, the service that I run, obviously, which is the graffiti and the street washing service, through growth, that has now been absorbed into my service area, so that is now paid for through the service area itself. What are the points you raised about? Could you just go back to the graffiti bits specifically?
So I would like to know how much every ward has in the pocket to remove graffiti.
So
it's not spent, doesn't roll over. What happens? To
no, so it doesn't work like that. So my service area, the graffiti service is part of the Suez contract. We pay a certain amount each year to Suez to provide that service. That service is then distributed around the borough. It isn't that it's on a ward-by-ward basis. We just remove graffiti where it's needed.
Mm-hmm. We offered free of charge removal from domestic property.
Yes.
Is it private owned property? Is it social house, which was run by whom?
Yes. So
who paid for that?
Yeah. So we do that as part of the service. So in terms of private property for residential, we remove that as we see it as a beneficial service to the local community. With regards to social housing, no, that would be for the social housing organisations to do themselves because they have budgets for this type of thing. So if it was somewhere like Notting Hill Housing, for example, it's their responsibility to remove graffiti from their own properties.
Thank you. I've got one other question from Florida from Councillor Wheel, who left it as she left me the question and she went out. And the two things about the ward data, and she's wondering if the enforcement data is on the website anywhere. And would it be possible to put extra columns on the end of, I'm not quite sure what she means about that, reported versus noticed columns in the ward breakdowns?
Which page is that?
Well, the ward data is on sort of page the 90s.
Oh, that's right, it was the appendix, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's in the appendix.
Yeah.
So is that on the council website anywhere, and is it kept up to date?
I don't believe it is on the website, but I can check that for you.
I'm not sure if the implication of her question is she thinks it should be.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it being made publicly available. So I will pass that on to the management of the street enforcement team, and I will arrange for Council Wheel to be updated and the committee to be updated on that.
Good, thank you very much, Matt, and we move on to the next paper. So thank you, Matt, for that. And item 6, which is time bound corrections, and I guess you're staying in position. I don't know if Terry's not joining us.
No, that's fine.
Really need to do the job. Okay, that's fine.
No, time bounding collections.
You're doing a fantastic job, Dan.
Right, so there's been some updates since I submitted this paper. So just to give you an idea of why we've looked to go down the route of time-bounded collection. So currently, there is no governance for when people put their waste out. What we can do through the street enforcement team is serve a statutory notice it's a receptacle notice under something called Section 47 of the Environmental Protection Act 1990. And what this can do is it can guide, it can stipulate how a business presents its waste, and that can be the type of receptacle that they use, what time they put it out, where they put it, not to contaminate their recycling, etc., etc. So you can sort of tailor it to what you need it to be. But what it doesn't do is say exactly when, from a sort of time-bounded window, waste can go out. It can say that it can be out for an hour, but that could be any hour in a 24-hour period. So at the moment, obviously, we provide a substantial number of the businesses in the borough commercial waste collections, but there are also equally many other companies, and anyone can just turn up at any time, anywhere, and collect waste. So this has been a problem, and we believe that bringing in time-bounded collections, where there are specific windows in each town centre that has been selected, will tidy this whole situation up. It means that no matter who you're using for your collection, whether it's us or one of the private companies, they can all only turn up at those specific times to collect the waste. Yeah. So it's going to provide times during the day, and if we give you an example here, if we were to say Kensington High Street, where we're just around the corner from, if they've got a collection between, so they've got 6 a.m. till 7 a.m. when the businesses can place their waste out, then between 7 and 9 a.m. is when the collection companies can come and collect the waste. So from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. when the next window opens, no waste will be allowed on Kensington High Street. So you've got a big chunk of the day where it would be breaching the regulations and the businesses would fall foul of the enforcement action if they were to put their waste out. So all of these windows for these different areas have the same principle. The time you're seeing in that table is when they can put the waste on the street, but each one has a 2-hour window after that where the businesses, the collection companies can come and collect the waste. So that's how that's going to work. In terms of where we are with this, I said that there's some updates. We've changed the enforcement regime slightly. I met with colleagues last week from parking, because parking already use penalty charge notices. So the difference between a penalty charge notice and a fixed penalty notice, just to give the background, is that a penalty charge notice is a civil offence, whereas a fixed penalty notice is a criminal offence. So a penalty charge notice, you won't go to court for it. You get a parking ticket. If you don't pay it, it gets escalated. You get more costs, etc. It can cost you more further down the line, and you could become a debtor. In which case, you'll then obviously, potentially fall foul of bailiffs, etc. But along with that particular way of doing it comes a big back office arrangement. So we were going to need to have internal appeals process. We're going to need to have a debtor chasing process, and all of this was going to be very laborious, and it was going to cost probably quite a lot of money to have to put it into play. So what we've decided, speaking with my colleagues in the street enforcement team, is that it actually would make more sense to stick with the fixed penalty arrangement, which I mentioned about the Section 47. So what we will do is, whenever a business breaches, they will receive a notice. That notice will then be in play. If they continue to breach, they will then get fixed penalty notices and potentially could get prosecuted. We don't envisage the breaches to be particularly high in terms of number. So again, the PCM process wasn't going to be good value for money. We weren't going to be getting loads. It's not like parking where you're getting tens of millions of pounds. It's it's going to be in the thousands, if that. So we felt that it was just not the correct way to go forward. So that's changed. The other thing that's changed is that the public consultation launches on Monday. So that's all ready to go. I will be sending around information to all members about this with all the information. That will run for 6 weeks, so it closes on Sunday the 8th of December. We will then obviously collate all the information. We will, if there's any small changes that need to be made, we'll make those changes. But we anticipate going live mid-January.
Is that by virtue of the nature of the pilot in January, or is it?
No, that's it. We go full on in January, all nine locations.
Okay, well let me go around the room and then I'll wrap up with another question. Sam, thank you so much for your hands this afternoon.
We're all very excited, I'm sure every councillor and has to do. And I have a little extension to put onto one of the room maps, and I don't know who I should hand that to.
Okay.
But I just want to check, did you say that this is not the time that the rubbish gets put out and collected, it's just the putting out time, and then it's a further 2 hours?
That's right, yeah.
So basically we've got, if I'm a resident on Kensington High Street, I'm going to work and there could be rubbish out for 3 hours from 6 until 9 in the morning. I'm coming home from work and there could be rubbish out from 5 until 8 in the late afternoon. Then I'm going out in the evening and there could be rubbish out from 9 till 12. And then I'm coming home, if I've got a good social life, I'm coming home between 12:30 and 3:30 and there could be rubbish out. So we've actually got 3, 6, 9, 12 hours, which is pretty much the entire working hours, where we have rubbish strewn all over the street. I think this is worse than what we've got now. And I wanted to ask you, and this is just me doing my job on the street, rather than
that's
trying to be rude, right? And we have to try and find a solution to it. That's 12 hours where people will come to me and say, there's rubbish everywhere, I thought you were changing this with collection. When I go to Westminster, in certain roads there where it says no rubbish whatever, I think the time period must be extremely narrow because it's absolutely spotless on Lyle Street behind Leicester Square, for example, where I was looking, and I think we wish we could have it like that. So 12 hours of rubbish will be completely within, that would be our dream scenario, is people behaving that. It's a long time for rubbish to be out on these major shopping streets.
So,
is it fair? Or am I getting the wrong answer?
No. It is a good point, and I think the first point to make is that 12 hours fewer than at the moment, where people could put waste out in a 24-hour period at any particular point. So it is going to limit, obviously, the number of times, the number of hours that waste can be present. I think that the reason we got this is that there has to be a fair amount of time for the waste collection companies to obviously get this waste off the streets, and with Westminster, etc., there'll be a similar principle. I don't know exactly what the windows are that they have, and they will vary obviously across Westminster. But in exactly the same way, they will have a period of time where people can place waste out, and then there will be a period of time where obviously the collection companies will come and collect it. One thing to say is that if there's, and bear in mind there's going to be enforcement around all the time looking at this as well. So if we take Kensington High Street again with that example, a business can put their waste out between 6 and 7. If an officer was out at 8 AM and they saw a business place their waste out at 8 AM, they themselves would again receive enforcement action because they're not allowed to place it out at that particular time. The placing out time is between 6 and 7.
Just a suggestion, the way to cut it from 12 hours down to 6 hours is to actually take out 2 of the time bands and simply say you've got to do it between, you find those, and this is maybe what the consultation is. So one of the consultations is are there too many bands here? Because I think you could probably say a lot of businesses put their stuff out in late afternoon when the shops or offices that close at like 6 o'clock, they want to put it out at 5, and then the restaurants want to put it out when they're closing at 10:30. So then you cut it right down.
To give you an idea of why we've chosen these particular time bandings, we've worked closely with our commercial waste team, looking at when businesses along these different town centre areas do put their waste out. And it would be particularly restrictive to companies that operate in our borough, the restaurants, etc. Some of them have 3 collections a day. So it's about ensuring that we are not too onerous, but we are obviously bringing in regulation at the same time and trying to find that balancing act of course, the consultation is going to tease some of this out, and if we do get a lot of feedback from businesses that actually they feel it is too much, then of course we can look at that. We will also get communication from the collection companies as well, so it'd be interesting to see what their views are on this. And like I say, none of this is set in stone. That's what we do in a public consultation. But we haven't just sort of plucked these out of the air. This has been working closely with our commercial waste
I think
colleagues.
it's going to be very tough. And I was just going to just make sure when the consultation goes out that people realise these aren't the setting out and collection time. These are setting out plus 2 hours, and then that's what tricked me. I thought, only 4 hours a day that I'm going to see rubbish.
I mean, you do make a very valid point there around the collection window,
Yeah.
and I think that does need to be reduced. And I think we were talking of at least reducing it to 1.5 hours. The sewers basically say if they've got Kings Road, it will take them 2 hours to collect that waste, and they don't want the businesses to fall foul of the new legislation. So it's a little bit of a compromise. They think they will be able to collect it a lot earlier than the 2 hours, but that will allow them that flexibility, because sometimes there's bad traffic, sometimes there's just operational issues.
And my one question, you could just ask Westminster, for example, Lyle Street, just behind Leicester Square. What's their total band time that people are doing?
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think that collection window does need to be looked at, otherwise we're not really solving
I'll be coming around the committee. So,
because ultimately what we want is clean streets, and this is meant to help. And I agree, if we're saying you can have waste out for 12 hours a day, then that's not really hitting the brief.
okay, let's move round the road and Toby will turn that.
Thank you. How should I read the sentences which have more than one, which have four? So you have 2 night periods which are very close to each other. Are they going to alternate, try them both, or?
Yeah, so what you've got there is the two different elements of the sort of nighttime economy. So the way it's based at the moment is that from working, as I mentioned with Councillor Macko, that the work with the commercial waste team has highlighted that these are key times when waste is generally put out. So it's important that we are able to offer, in some locations, not all, but the majority of the town centres do have twice nightly collections, because that's just the nighttime economy there.
I'm curious, so what's the early? I mean, because I can see, like, just as somebody worked in a lot of bars and a lot of pubs, in the past. Neither is really look like ideal times to be putting it out. I mean, maybe the midnight one. What are the earlier?
Yeah, so for example, if you look at Notting Hill Gate, so you've got 9:30 till 10:30. What that would be is you've probably got businesses there that have 3 collections a day. So the 9:30 to 10:30 is where they're getting rid of a lot of their early lunchtime waste they've generated, and then the midnight to 1 o'clock is obviously the evening waste.
I think I just put my the suggestion of seeing if we can reduce the number of bands. Okay, that's it.
Thanks.
And just so we're all clear as well, not every business obviously uses all these windows, so I think the businesses with the most collections a day is 3 collections a day, and then most only either receive a morning or an evening. Some only receive 1, so we're not saying every business will have 4 collections. It's just we have to offer those windows for collections because every business is slightly different, and from a commercial perspective, if we don't get that business.
Can I just note, sorry to if I could just note though that from a residence and sort of nuisance point of view, you can have 2 businesses next to each other that are using. So it will in effect have the same as 4 vans in the day. Very busy. Anyway,
I think that is definitely something we need to look at, because otherwise are we being too flexible for businesses?
Thank you. In terms of the legal FPN putting in to the new regime, which is the civil, which is totally fine with me. I endorse it, I support that. Obviously, Holland, I can only speak for mine, so that's my ward. It's not a huge commercial one, so these restrictions or these timings won't apply to it's just this.
Yeah.
And the point on obviously Nottingham probably most relevant to Holland. have you factored the collection times for specific areas?
Yes, so you'll notice that the timings are slightly different because the crews are working around. So some crews will cover more than one street, which is why there'll be a slightly different timing for some compared to others, because they're obviously going to arrive at one before the other one and then move on.
I get that. No, I mean, these are collections by the borough, but what about the...
No, this applies to all. Yeah. So this will be the same for everyone. Absolutely.
Private or...
Yes,
so
so
you've
this
got
leg-
that data.
Yeah, so this legislation will basically say when the collection window is set, First Mile or Biffa or whoever have to come at that time. They cannot come and collect waste out that window.
No.
So it basically just coordinates everything rather than, so you don't have the First Mile bags out, then RBKC bags at different times. So it's just to get all the bags out together and collected as quickly as possible together.
There is an FAQs which is on the consultation page, which explains this, that if a business, so if someone wasn't able to adhere to this, their collection company can come at another time, but what they'd have to do is direct collections, which means that they'd have to either go into the business and collect it, or the business would have to come out and take it to the vehicle, but they wouldn't be able to put it on the street. So if they do that type of arrangement, they can collect anytime they want.
Because obviously there's no regulation for this type of, can the businesses challenge as a group?
I mean, they potentially could do. I mean, we've been working with the bids, so Opportunity Kensington and the Knightsbridge Partnership, and they're fully in support of this. So I think that all of their members are going to be, happy to obviously go with what we're asking them to do.
Time banding is very common across other London boroughs as well. So
They're pretty much the only ones that don't do it.
it's not a new concept. So I think it's tried and tested. So that's why we're doing it.
So,
Thank you. And just a quick comment on the bandings. You can also reverse that idea of restricting the bandings. Let's say companies that now put their garbage out once or maybe twice a day now think, oh, I can do it 3 or even 4 times, which is actually a risk as well there, where we can have more opportunities and more garbage outside. But to come back on the questions I had, how restrictive is the definition of a town centre? Because for instance, for my work, Earlscourt Road, the only street that is highlighted is literally Earlscourt Road.
Yeah.
Whilst we also have businesses along Henley Road or Hogarth Road, or even south of Old London Road around the corner. Are they part of that exercise or not?
No, so there'll be different crews that collect. The reason we've done it this way is that it's just not possible from a time frame perspective, to be going into like Hogarth and other parts of Earlscourt Road, and then get back onto Earlscourt Road. It would just, the window would have to be enormous. So it's just not possible. So where you've got problems with businesses in somewhere like Hogarth Road, we would deal with them separately with the same legislation. So we would serve them a Section 47 notice, and we would ensure that they don't put their waste out for more than that same set sort of period of time, for 2 hours at the most, and they wouldn't be able to just leave it there all day. We do that already, so businesses already do fall under this legislation. But yeah, I mean, look, we will look to expand it potentially in the future, and if somewhere like Hogarth lends itself to that, then we will look to introduce that. But for the time being, we're going to start on these major high roads, and then some of the smaller spurs that come off them, etc. That might be something for the future.
And for instance, and that has been a problem on Hogarth and Kenway, is where businesses put their garbage out together, and then the private waste companies have to separate them, find the garbage of the company that they're collecting for, or even put it all together around the corner on Hogarth Road, not whilst the business is actually on Earlscourt Road. How do you deal with those kind of situations?
So again, that can be dealt with through the same legislation, through the same notice. A business should only place its waste directly outside its own premises unless it's got written confirmation from the council that it can do otherwise. So sometimes there are collection points. Bute Street, I mentioned Bute Street earlier. Since the renovation of Bute Street took place, we actually have 2 collection points now at either end of the street. So businesses on the left-hand side take all their waste to that end, and the businesses on the other side take all their waste to that end. That works well, and they're all obviously working on that basis. But unless you're instructed, they have been obviously being instructed by us to do so. Unless you're instructed to do so, you should only place it outside your own premises. Yeah.
And do we also look at how the waste is presented?
Yes.
Taking into account also, we have lots of takeaway places that use a lot of oil to cook their food.
Yeah.
And trying to clean up Oscar Road pavement is ridiculously difficult over the years now, because so much of that deep fried oil has been seeping into the pavement, and it looks stained whatever we do.
Yeah. So that again is covered in the regulations that bags should be tied securely, that they shouldn't be leaking, that measures should be taken to stop that. Where it continues to be a problem for a particular business, and we've done it numerous times to businesses in the borough, you will receive a Section 47 notice, and one of the criteria will be that you have to double bag, for example, or place cardboard underneath the bags, or both, whatever's necessary. We can then also take further action. Should a business continue to stain the public highway, we could take enforcement action to make them check wash it themselves. And there are businesses that do this actually. Some are doing it off their own backs. They've taken a decision as a good business to do that. Others have actually received enforcement notices from the council and subsequently done it.
Would it be possible to get data on the enforcement notices for such cases? Because I'm quite keen on just looking at
We can give you data.
that we have on Oxford Road.
We can give you numbers in terms of how many businesses are under a particular. What we can't do is give you individual data because that's GDPR.
Yeah, thank you.
I think my questions have been answered already.
No, actually mine have been mostly answered as well, but I just want to do a sort of quick check of understanding for me that what we're seeing in this paper could well be adjusted after you've got consultation responses and this is the final version. And how flexible are you to expanding the scheme after it's been introduced? Let's say after a few months.
I think we will
work, or it might work so well you want to expand it. What were your thoughts on that?
And we will be reviewing. We'll do a review after 6 months, so we can get an understanding of how well it's working, tweak any bits that need to be, where things maybe aren't working so well. Bear in mind, you mentioned the clear wall crews earlier. They'll be working in tandem with this, so they will be going out and checking the streets during the times where there shouldn't be waste on the street and clearing any waste that is there, unless it's in bags that are with details of a private waste collection company. So, for example, if Veolia have got bags out at a time when they shouldn't do, we won't be collecting that. What we'll be doing is making sure that the street enforcement team are obviously checking that. Part of the enforcement also with the clear wall crew will be that we'll have some enforcement officers that go out with the clear wall crew, and what they'll do is when they discover bags, they will open them up, find evidence and collate that evidence, and then obviously take enforcement actions accordingly.
And I hope that won't be at the expense of the clear wall crews doing the jobs in the domestic or the residential streets.
No, that's, I mean, all these streets are on that clear wall already, so it's not changing anything.
Good. And I think it'll be quite interesting to see a comparison between Gloucester Road and Old Brompton Road, because I can see why you've chosen Gloucester Road and I can see why you've chosen all 9, but if I was going to nominate a 10th, I'd put Old Brompton Road on it. You right from South Kent Station and the interactions all the way to Wells Court, but there are bits that need this attention, but because it's not on there, it'd be interesting to compare the two of them.
It actually was one that we were considering, so we do realise that it does have problems, and we'll definitely consider it. It'll be one of the top of the list when we do look to expand.
All right, so I think it would be useful to have some feedback on that perhaps next year when we in the next fiscal year when we consider waste collection again. I think.
I just had one note. That's right. Westminster says it's got a 30-minute window.
It says that for the placing the waste out.
Yes. It must be not put out more than 30 minutes before the collection window. If I haven't found on the website yet, it's how long they're waiting.
Okay.
We can ask that.
We will come into it. Speak to that.
That's interesting. Might well be an adjustment that might be beneficial to our residents.
And it could be actually that we have a slightly different window depending on the street. So it might be that one street can get away with half an hour, whereas another one might need an hour. So yeah, I mean it's like we say, we're flexible. We want it to work. It's important that we take feedback and try and tweak it as best we can to make it a success.
Right, well, thanks. That's a good note to finish your paper on, unless there's some questions from the floor. Maybe no councillors left. Thank you very much, Pete. Your service that you provide is one of the few things that every single resident in the borough benefits from, and they all notice it when it goes wrong.
Which are very rare.
Very rare. They hugely appreciated what you guys do, and thank you very much indeed for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
Very long session and for everything you're doing and keep in touch.
Thank you.
So moving on to just briefly to item 7, which is the programme. I was just going to introduce the fact that we've got the next event committee is the e-bikes conference on Monday. I'm hoping you will be very fantastic. We have about 65 members of the public registered. It might have gone up today because that was the last number I heard, James. 66. And I'm sure we'll have a few turn up on the night as well.
Yeah.
So really,
Last week.
for anybody who came to the last conference, the residents type conference that I chaired, the Thinking Repairs conference, we had round tables in the small hall. Just so anywhere, there won't be anywhere specific to the committee. What I will do is I shall start by asking panel members to do a 3-minute pitch. The panel are Lyme, Forest, Council in the form of the lead member and the responsible officer, and London Council and the London-wide solution. So that'll be their introduction. We'll then go out with the roving mic round the room, probably two roving mics, yeah. And I will take contributions, probably 8 to 10 contributions from members of the public on the first time round, and then ask for any comebacks from the panel or individual members of the panel. And then second time round, I'll probably ask for elected representatives to put their hands up if you've got something to say. I'll try and come to the committee first, and then any others. I know quite a few councillors, one of the MPs are coming, so I'll give them a chance in the second round, and again back to the panel, and then we might have time for the third round. I don't know. With 60 or 70 members of the public, it'd probably won't be able to come back a second time. Whereas the last one I did was much smaller, and people got a couple of 2 or 3 flights to the Cherry if they wanted it. But we'll be flexible on the night, and then we will have a think about it. James will be drafting a report for us to consider at our next meeting as to what conclusions we might draw out of it, and any recommendations we might want to make to the council leadership. But it's more of a listening exercise on Monday for us. See what the public have to say, whether it be users of the bikes or people who are irritated by the parking or a mixture of both. Yes, and actually I doubt if the people who use the bikes are probably not the sort of people who come to a council conference, but that's my guess. But we shall see. We'll see who turns up. We aim to be surprised and expect the unexpected, and we'll consider the report at the next meeting or the one after. Are we doing it for the December one or the one after? Probably the one after.
I think the 27th of January is
Probably better, because the December meeting, and I can't remember what date is it, the 4th? Yes, the 4th of December will be quite a packed one because we've got the budget to go through, and that's always quite a long serial to discuss. And we've also got the net zero paper, the annual progress update on that, which is a normal length paper, but it still takes 45 minutes to go through, so that's probably enough for one meeting, but we can hold over the bikes discussion on the recommendations till January. Good, anybody got any last follow-ups before I close the meeting? Right, that's it. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
See you on Monday. Yeah.